Okay, we've looked at passive figures where people are standing or walking or generally going about the business without particularly drawing attention to themselves. Now in this set of figures what we've got is what I call active figures, where they're all doing something. They're pushing, or they're digging, or they're cycling, or they're eating. It doesn't matter what it is. The main thing you got to remember with that sort of figure in a picture is that first of all you need to create the movement that you're trying to generate, so the pushing movement or a digging movement such as that. So the figure's got to look like they're actually doing that, and this is where the skeletal image helps so much. And the second thing you've got to remember is the moment you put an activity and some movement into the figure, or the same with an animal or a vehicle or something, then it's going to draw attention to itself and it's going to become a focal point in the picture. Now that's not a problem if you decide that the landscape is going to become a background to a focal point with some figures in it. No problem at all. But just be aware that if that's what you want, you're going to have to plan it beforehand. If we take away the pictures, you can see how well those skeletal images stand up compared to the pictures that they're portraying. Here is somebody pushing, well, it's a guy pushing the settee. He could have a rope over his shoulder, for example, and really leaning forward trying to tow a heavy weight. What else have we got? We've got this guy here who's digging, and you can see how you can see very little of his body, almost nothing of his body. In fact, you can see his legs and you can see his head and his shoulders, but the rest of his torso is completely invisible. And yet it's not a difficult picture to actually create. At first sight it might look difficult. When you see the skeletal image, it's dead easy. This lady here who's digging, well, again, she's got her foot on an imaginary spade, and you can see even without the spade being visible, that skeletal image tells you that somebody is digging and that they've got a foot on the spade. So let's have a look at how some of these figures work in practice with a little bit of paint around them. Right, you can see I've sketched in 3 or 4 little skeleton figures. I've done this one, the guy who's pushing. I've done this guy here who's bent over double digging. We've got this lady here who's bent over double but a side-on view, who's working on the land, and that's this one. And here we've got the guy who's cycling. So I'm just going to paint those in exactly the same way that we did for the passive figures, because there's no difference in techniques. Right, now you can see that I've just blocked in these figures with some basic colours, and already they're starting to look the part. But at this stage they do look quite cartoonish, so don't worry when you get to this sort of cartoon stage. It means that all you've done is you've got the basic outline sorted and the blocked in details. The way we get them away from looking cartoonish to the more realistic figure that you want in your landscape is by adding the lights and the darks and some of the details in exactly the same way that I've already done in the passive figures. Right, I've just detailed these 2 figures and I thought it might be useful to see where we're at. You can see that I've put quite a lot of whitish paint over the dark hair, and it's the same off-white paint. It's basically, if you want to have a look, it's actually this sort of colour here that's got a little bit of yellow ochre in, but it's quite pale. And I've also put some in there because it's got the yellow ochre in. It generates a warmth on the back of this turquoise blue t-shirt, and you can see that even though you've got virtually a white t-shirt here, the eye still reads it as the blue because that's the base colour you can see within the shadow. But you can see how the shadow has been blended into the feet, so the whole figure and the shadow are as one, and so it anchors the figure very, very firmly to the ground. Now with this guy here, you can see I've done a little sort of baseball cap on him with the peak pointing that way. So even though you can't see his head, it looks for all the world as if he's looking left. It tells the viewer he's looking left. And a little bit of a light area down this side of his arms, and obviously the same with his legs. a little bit of light area here on the hat and on the shoulders gives that impression of bright sunlight. Certainly will do when we put the shadows in. So I'm going to do that and carry on with these two figures. Right, I've just put the shovel in on this building worker. I'm waiting for that to dry and then I'll put some highlights and darks in it. In the meantime, here's a guy who I'm just drawing with a bike, and just to show you how easy it is to draw or draw a bike, at least the basics of it. You've got a basic T shape here, assuming that the handlebars are straight across like that, and then all that you have is the forks will come down like that, and then you have the wheels, if you like that, or the front wheel anyway. And then it's a matter of just putting the pedals up like that, across like that, and then up to meet his other foot. And then it's really the shadow. Don't forget you've got a front wheel and a back wheel, so what you're looking to achieve here is the shadow from the front wheel, perhaps just a hint of the back wheel there, like that. Front wheel, back wheel shadow, then the figure. I just thought we'd put in the details for the bike and the rider, so you can just remind yourself how I've done that. It's exactly the same with these. It's plenty of light on the left hand side. You can see I've got a fair amount of, well, it's actually neat titanium white, you can see that. But because it does tend to settle in a little bit, the rest of the colours, the underlying colours, in this case the yellow ochre, and for his trousers yellow ochre plus a little bit of raw umber, are actually going to show through as those base colours. When we go back into some slightly darker colour, and I'm going to be using the yellow ochre with a little bit of raw umber attached or mixed, and that suddenly starts to actually bring out the lights and the darks. Certainly if we're using that colour, it's almost more neat raw umber that will be confined to the darker areas like that, and then just very, very slightly and gently blending in a mid-tone like that. So it's not too much of a hard transition. There we go. As I say, you can take that and develop that as much as you want, but you can see how the principle works. Now, coming to our little lady farm worker, we've not an awful lot more to do to this. We just perhaps need to bring in some highlights on the top of the shoulder. You can see I've put some lighter areas, the same principle, white over the blue, and then just blended back in a little bit. The same with the skirt, same with the legs, and even the same with a little bit of light on the, or white rather, on the back of the boots. Now that's fine as far as it goes. There's 4 figures that I've done for you. There's probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 figures here, and again any number of figures that you can pick up from your own photographs. But the thing to remember here is that these figures are all about 2–2.5 inches high, and very often in a landscape you'll have figures that are much smaller, perhaps very often only an inch tall. So the trick then for these sort of figures is to simplify even more and make them even smaller. And the good news is you don't have to worry about getting too much light and dark and colour in them, because very often from the sort of distance where they're only an inch tall, all you're going to get is little more than a silhouette. So let's just have a quick look before we finish this lesson on how that works. Right, you can see this guy is barely an inch tall, and it's exactly the same pose, or basically the same pose as this one, and you can see how quickly I've done it. I'm using a dark brown and phthalo, or a raw umber and a phthalo blue mix for this guy here. It's, in fact, we're almost getting back, when you think about it, to just painting in the skeleton position, or the skeleton outline. Little more than that, in fact. And the same with the cyclist, the head, the upright pose of the body with the arms leaning forward to the handlebars, thin line to the handlebars, but then one leg out here. No need for the detail of the pedals and the wheels. That will be sufficient, because all that you need to do then is just drag out the figure, give a hint of the wheels, and there we are. Let's have a look at this lady now, who's bending over like that. Notice how her head is downwards like that, because she's looking down at what she's doing. Okay, now you've seen how quickly we've painted these little figures. I've just now added some white into them to varying degrees, just to give a little bit of hint of sunlight. You can see the idea, and there's no colour at all, and yet they look right, they look convincing. They're a counterpart of their closer versions here, and they're only 1/2 inch to 1 inch high. So an ideal sort of situation, again using these skeleton type figures, where by doing no more than the outline of the arms and the legs and the backbone and the head, you can very easily and very quickly create 3D convincing figures in the middle distance that will enhance any landscape painting.